465-4700 and ask for me, Jim DeCesar.
Indiana in the Morning here on WCCS AM 1160, brought to you by First Commonwealth Bank. Joining us this morning in studio, we have representatives from the Indiana Area School District, Walter Schroth from the school board, Superintendent Michael Vuckovich is with us. Gentlemen, good morning and welcome to Indiana in the Morning.
Good morning. How are you this morning?
I'm very well.
Good.
Now, we've had lots of news over the last several months concerning the Indiana Area School Board and, of course, the work that you folks are doing to plan the future for our elementary schools here in the district. So where would you like to start? What do you want folks to know?
Well, I just want to start off by saying that this has been a process. It's been a tough process. It's been fairly time-consuming, but the situation is complicated enough that we have to take the time to do the proper evaluation and try to come to a reasonable solution, either academically and or one that meets our budget and financial constraints. Mike, maybe you...
Yeah, no, thanks. First of all, thanks for inviting us here today. It's always important to communicate with our stakeholders about what's going on. Let me start off by saying I really applaud the board for taking their time and spend the last several months to go through a pretty long process because they value transparency and communication, to go through a long process to really find out what they think is best for us academically and financially. And it's sometimes a tough obstacle to balance both worlds, but the board did a great job doing that and trying to be cognizant of what our taxpayers can afford as well as what our students need. And we're going to continue to try to balance those two worlds because we understand they coexist. My job is to put the best educational platform we can forward, and the board's job is to support that, but also ends to the means and really try to balance our budget. So we work well together, and we're appreciative of the process. And I think the process was really important because it's transparent, it was open, and it was reflective. And I think as governing body, that's what we need to be, and that's what the process really stood out to me for.
And this is really a complicated and detailed subject that you have to tackle, because when you talk about buildings, number one, that takes a lot of money, a lot of care. And then you talk about the students and the parents and involved, and you have to keep them in your thoughts as well. And, of course, the taxpayers who are funding all our schools, and they have to be thought of as well, too.
That's absolutely right. And I think that was really what, while I think that the consolidation of the 4-5 grades into a single cohort makes a lot of sense academically, the overriding factor was right now we just simply don't have enough cash on hand or the willingness to go borrow significant amounts of money to do the things that we would really like to do. And that really was the determining factor, I think, in the end.
Now, back when I attended school in the district back in the 60s, it was a lot simpler. If you lived in this neighborhood, you went to Eisenhower. If you were over here, you went to Horace Mann. They were just starting to build East Pike. And, of course, Ben Franklin was also in operation then. But things have really changed over the last 40 or 50 years, haven't they?
I'll kind of defer to Mike on that.
Yeah, they sure have. One thing the board really values, the one thing you left out is our emotional attachment to our buildings and our emotional value to what we have here and what's great about Indiana. And we want to value that, preserve that the best we can, but also be aware of what our financial hurdles are and academic programming needs are. So, yeah, we're going to balance that. We're going to continue to do that. The one thing we really have to address is, some of these tough decisions the board has to now address. It's because some of the shortfall is happening at the state level. And you spoke about the 1960s, 1970s. Back then, their contribution to school districts was over 50%. You fast forward to 2019, that contribution now is less than 37%. So now you're looking at the needs as costs rise, getting less money from the state, and now it's pushed down to the locals. And the board's done a great job trying to balance that world and balance that burden to try to give our kids what they need, but also be aware of where we are financially.
Now, we've heard in the news reports covering the school board meetings that you started out with a whole list of different plans and scenarios. You've been trimming those down over the past several months. So bring us up to date on what the latest possibility is.
Well, Chuck, I do want to say one thing about that. my background is in forestry, and we do a lot of long-term planning when you learn to be a forester and you think really long-term. Part of that planning process is to seriously evaluate every possible solution once you've identified the problems. And that was the reason why we wound up with 30-some solutions to begin with, so that we could look at every single opportunity that we had to resolve this in the best way possible. And then it continued to get pared down. What the board voted on a week or 2 weeks ago was essentially to maintain the 4 buildings as they currently exist today and do what improvements we can on them based on the approximate $8.5 million that we have left out of the $10 million that was borrowed for the mega school. Okay, so it's kind of a steady as she goes course right now until we can figure out how to come up with some additional funds.
Yeah, no matter which of those plans you choose, you're going to have to spend some money. That's the bottom line, right?
Absolutely. The board really values the idea of having a great learning space, learning environment. So we're going to invest in our schools, the money we have, and make the money go as far as we can to increase the beauty and the aesthetic appeal of the schools, because we already have great teachers and we have great kids. Now we just need to bring the buildings up to speed, and that's what we're going to focus on now. And the board's already moving in that direction. You saw we made arrangements for East Pike entryway to be done. We're going to start having some more conversations, but we want to go slow to go fast. Make sure we're methodical and strategic in how we're going to spend our money, and make sure we get the best return on that investment.
Now, when you look at all the other school districts in Indiana County, Indiana area is unique because this is the only district did their elementary, junior, and senior high schools. So this is something that's pretty unique to Indiana County, having to take care of a number of elementary buildings. Plus, you have the junior high, which is also a separate building.
Yeah, but I think particularly when you look at like a school district, and I'm just going to pick Penns Manor
Right.
or Marion Center or Homer Center, where those have consolidated. For Indiana to basically go out and buy 50 or 60 acres of ground, which is effectively what you'd need to do, to have one consolidated campus. I mean, if you thought the uproar over the mega school was something to behold, you would be talking, hundreds of millions of dollars to do that. And reality is that is really a non-starter. You're right in that we are unique, but I think what we have to do as a school board and as a school administration is to capitalize on that uniqueness, okay, and figure out how to take the best advantage of that difference. Again, to Mike's point, what's in the best interest of our students overall, both in the borough and the surrounding townships.
Do you see a day, maybe in the near future, where possibly the state would be kicking in more funds, or there could be more financial contributions from some other outside sources for school districts?
Yeah, I do, Chuck. I think we're at a point now where it's like when you realize Santa Claus doesn't exist, you can't unlearn that. I think what the governor's done and the secretary has done has been amazing to really invest in education and try to make some difficult decisions. I think we know this. My ability to retire depends on my kids' ability to learn and earn. And I think you see a real shift going from high-stakes testing to more of a whole child approach where we worry about the social, emotional learning side of things, but also how we prepare kids for career. So I think it's coming. I just think change takes a long time, and it's something that's on everyone's radar. I got to tell you, I think the one thing that really needs to be addressed, and I hope it happens at the state level, is we got to really look at charter reform. Indiana area school districts losing anywhere from $1 million to about $1.2 million in charter school funding, and I think that's a flawed formula. I think it's a flawed law, and it needs addressed because that can really significantly impact the opportunities we provide for our kids. And without raising taxes, it can increase our revenue and bring revenue back to the district. So I think it's something to address, but I think change is on the way. I just think like anything else, it takes some time, but I think the awareness is there.
Now, what about some school districts have actually consolidated with other school districts? Is that something that maybe could help out the situation in the future?
I think it's one thing that everyone has to look at. But I'll tell you, before we start talking about consolidation of schools, I would push back and say the state just opened 250 charter schools. So as you talk about consolidations of brick and mortars, I don't see that happening with cyber schools. So I have a real concern with that. And I think we have to go slow to go fast. There's a lot of emotions and pride tied to school communities, and it's not one thing that we would say, hey, we have to do, but we're always going to be good listeners.
Chuck, I'd like to comment on that. I think what you're really going to look at here for that serious consolidation to occur is for a district to get in such financial straits that the state steps in and forces their hand. From a political point of view, none of the state legislature is really excited about forcing a consolidation because of the local pride that everybody has in their football team, in their basketball team, in their plays and music and so on and so forth, because that's an important part of community development. So I think realistically, if a school district is in financial trouble where the state will step in, then I think you'll see an effort on their part to move that individual district to some sort of a consolidation plan.
Walter Schroth, Michael Vuckovich, we thank you so much for stopping by. And, we thank you for the hard work that you guys put in, because it's not an easy job sitting where you are.
Thank you, Chuck. It was a pleasure to be here this morning.
Indiana in the Morning, stay tuned. We're going to be taking a look at news. Fox is up at the top of the hour. Then we'll hear from Josh and also Jack Benedict on